Glenn, it's so great to have you back here on Mea Culpa. So much going on and so much expected to continue to go on over the course of time as we sort of enter the new year, right? And I want to just begin by asking you, obviously, the big news of the day is the passing of former President Jimmy Carter, which marks the end of an era. At 100 years of age, God bless, right? Can you do me a favor? Reflect on not his presidency, that everybody sort of already knows, but his post-presidency humanitarian legacy and how it contrasts with the modern political landscape.
You know, Michael, it feels like there's this bygone days of decency that I don't expect to return anytime soon. You know, Jimmy Carter and any former president could do pretty much whatever he wants in his post-presidency. Go on speaking tours, really, fill his bank account to the brim. He can write books, he can peddle products. What he chose to do, among other things, is help those who are less fortunate. I mean, we have all seen him sort of endlessly building homes as part of Habitat for Humanity. We would see that he struggled to do it in his later life. Who can forget the pictures of him, with that black eye or with a head bandage because he took a tumble as he was helping build homes for folks who needed help. That was not for the cameras. That was not for self-enrichment. That was because he felt that he had a mission to help others. He helped others in his capacity as president, and he continued to help others in what some might call smaller endeavors. I actually think of them as greater and more significant endeavors, helping one person at a time. And boy, our government needs more people like Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I remember in the late 70s, and I believe it was the first time ever that a president of the United States lit a menorah at the White House, and I just remember that because at the time I was I was in a yeshiva, and it was very, very important, obvious, for the Jewish community. But I want to ask you this question: what lessons do you think that future presidents can learn from Carter's approach to public service after leaving office?
Nobody should ever confuse kindness with weakness. The power of decency, and when you talk about him lighting a menorah, I mean, the power of diversity and inclusivity is a beautiful thing. I have long said that diversity is America's superpower. And frankly, at the rate we're going, it may be one of the few superpowers we have left. And, building a diverse America makes us stronger, not weaker. Being kind and being decent is not a sign of weakness. I believe it's a sign of strength, including strength of character. That's what we need. That's what we need in government. And that is what we are missing, and I think have been missing for quite some time. So, let's all take a moment, pause, reflect, and dedicate ourselves to decency. I would like to think that decency should be a bipartisan goal. Maybe that's Pollyanna, given what we know we are experiencing these days with Trump and his flunkies. But, decency should be a guiding principle.
But to be fair, right, and we already know Trump, this is not, we will never see, and I can assure you this, knowing the guy since, 2006, 2007, we're never going to see him with a hard hat on, at a saw, cutting wood, hammering, infrastructure together, right? Building a house for Habitats for Humanity. But then again, in all fairness, we didn't see that with Barack Obama either. We also never saw that with the Bushes, not Bush 1 or Bush 2. What do you think made Jimmy Carter special in that way. Because, it's easy to point the finger at Trump. We already know that he's self-centered. He's not doing anything for anyone. In fact, I don't know if you heard this, but since becoming president-elect, everybody talks about how Elon Musk has made like over $240 billion. He's added $240 billion to his net worth. Trump has earned over $3 billion. He's increased his net worth by $3 billion. He's motivated by money. Jimmy Carter was not. Neither, again, was Barack Obama, the Bushes, and so on. What made him so different?
Michael, I happen to believe, I don't think there's any one answer to that question. I believe decency is in your DNA. Either you have it or you don't. Now, your environment obviously plays a role, your upbringing, what your parent or parents believed were important qualities, what they tried to instill in you. But I think it's either in your DNA or it's not. And I am no political expert or pundit. I don't even pretend to play one on TV. But what I will say is, the more I have watched governments come and go and politicians come and go, it seems to me that there are kind of two buckets of politicians or people attracted to politics. People who really want to do good for their constituents and for the American people, and people who just want to do for themselves. And often it feels like the people who want to do for themselves, the Trumps, I would put the McConnells in that bucket, are ruthless enough to rise to the top. And I often wonder if the people with the decency in their DNA, folks who are drawn to public service because they really want to do good for others, maybe are lacking a little bit of the ruthlessness gene that may be necessary to rise to the top and stay at the top to do good for wide swaths of the American population. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking back to my minor in sociology undergrad, but that's kind of the way I see it. I often wonder why the ruthless folk seem to win out so much more than the decent folk. And I think that is why we are where we are. There may have been many good, decent people in government who wanted to hold Trump and company accountable for trying to destroy our democracy, but they weren't ruthless enough to go about it in an efficient and effective way, and they gave it all away. And now we are about to suffer the consequences of our institutions of government and the many good people that populate those institutions giving it all away to Trump and company. And we're going to see just how damaging that is to our republic.
See, I think a lot of it had to do with Jimmy Carter and his he had true, deep religious conviction. I mean, even in his later years, and only stopped because of COVID, he was teaching Sunday school at church. He had a true, deep religious conviction. And that religious conviction was not centered around the almighty dollar. It was, to him, centered around the almighty God and spreading the word. I think a lot of that has to do with it because, while you can have a religious conviction, his was just something special, very similar, believe in it, as well as to his marriage with Rosalind, which was also very different than what you see in, let's just call it, modern politics.
Yeah. But the flip side of the deep religious conviction observation is how many wars were fought over deep religious convictions. That is not a condemnation of religion or people who are motivated by, the best aspects of religion. I just think, religion done right, done with decency and kindness and love of thy neighbor is a beautiful thing, and guides people like Jimmy Carter to live the life that we saw him live. It's just others will use religious conviction for all sorts of reasons.
That's for sure. I mean, we're talking about now putting the 10 Commandments in all public school. Well, yes, it's great to put the 10 Commandments or teach the 10 Commandments to young children, but you got to abide by them yourself, right? I mean, it's like going to the store, buying the book, but never cracking it open, so you have no idea what it says. There's obviously no benefit there. I want to bring up, obviously, we're now into like year 2+ of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And one of the things when Zelensky was here speaking to Biden, before, of course, making the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, to embrace President-elect Trump, he spoke with Biden and expressed to him the danger of what could take place if they don't have funds within which to protect themselves, and that Trump ends up holding up funds to Ukraine on behalf of Russia. And as a result, Biden just recently approved an additional $2.5 billion in aid package to Ukraine to get them through, let's just say, the next quarter. How do you think that this move will shape foreign policy leading up to Trump's inauguration, especially amid growing isolationist sentiments?
I think Joe Biden is probably doing whatever he can to try to cabin Donald Trump's worst instincts. We saw it play out in the first Trump administration. It was great that funds had been congressionally designated to go to Ukraine so it could defend itself against unlawful Russian aggression. And what did Donald Trump do with those funds? He said, yeah, I know you want to be able to defend yourself, but I need a favor, though. I'm going to need you to announce a sham investigation into my political opponent. I mean, that's extortion and bribery any way you cut it, right? Something for which Donald Trump has never been held accountable. And it looks like at this point, he never will be held accountable. So it's great that Joe Biden is going to try to cabin Trump's worst instincts. But I have a real fear for, what kind of havoc Donald Trump will be able to wreak with respect to the war between Russia and Ukraine. I only hope that we have Senate Republicans who remember the principles of Ronald Reagan and what he thought of, the evil empire, and act accordingly, because it's in our national interest to make sure, there is no Russian expansion, that they don't take Ukraine. And it looks like there are some senators who are prepared to step up and stand strong against Donald Trump's worst instincts. I mean, one of the things, Michael, I've been heartened by is how many times Senate Republicans, and even not only Senate Republicans, but House of Representative Republicans have pushed back and already told Donald Trump no, whether it was on Matt Gaetz, whether it was on Rick Scott as Speaker, whether it was raising the debt ceiling, whether it was shutting down the government as Donald Trump wanted them to do. It has been Republicans in both the Senate and the House who have said no, 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 and no. And that goes double for Matt Gaetz. Hell no. So I have been at least minimally encouraged that now that these senators are in place comfortably for a number of years and they don't have to worry so much about their own reelection prospects, they may actually be willing to protect their own constituents and, by extension, the American people from Donald Trump's worst instincts. But we'll know a lot more come January 20th.
Yeah, that we will. So, you're not the first person I've heard turn around and say that Trump has escaped accountability. He's the Teflon Don, and so on. While I'll acknowledge that 3 of the 4 indictments he has escaped accountability, you know that the Second Circuit just announced that they went against Trump in the E. Jean Carroll civil judgment, and that was off of the first case, the $5 million sexual assault / defamation case. So there's certainly accountability there. There's certainly accountability when it comes to Tish James's New York Attorney General case, again, civil, against Donald Trump for $500 million in business fraud. So that case is also on appeal. And as far as I see, I don't see the Second Circuit, which would have that case to hear. And it's always their position to favor inside of the winning party. I don't see Trump escaping that accountability either. But last, we have the Manhattan District Attorney case. Judge Juan Merchan, while he may have pushed off the sentencing, there still stands 34 criminal guilty charges against Trump. So, accountability has not always been the way a lot of people describe it. What's your position on that?
I guess my position, recognizing I was a criminal prosecutor my whole career, 30 years, I don't think all accountability is created equal. Undoubtedly, it's important that Donald Trump was held accountable by a jury and by the justice system for what he did to Miss Carroll. Undeniably, it's important that he was held accountable for, in a very real sense, bilking the people of New York out of, untold millions of dollars by his long-term systemic business fraud, perhaps a less direct victimization of the New York people than was his victimization of E. Jean Carroll. All important accountability. It all boils down to money. And if we believe that Donald Trump being financially penalized for what he did in those two cases equals accountability, when we know that the way he will come up with the money is to shill some more Trump crap, watches, sneakers, Bibles, perfume, who the hell wants to smell like Donald Trump? But that is how he will come up with the money to pay those money judgments. Is that accountability? I don't know. I think everybody can have a different opinion on that. Moving to the New York criminal case, it's absolutely accountability, at least theoretical accountability, that a jury of his peers convicted him of 34 felony crimes, falsifying business records to cheat in the 2016 presidential election. You know this one better than anybody because, you bore the brunt of what happened there. I mean, talk about a supreme injustice. You were held accountable for something that you did for Donald Trump's benefit at his direction, and he's never really yet been held accountable for that. That's an obscenity to the notion of equal justice in my book. So in theory, that's absolutely some accountability there. A jury of his peers convicting him in literally a New York minute, as quick as they returned those 34 guilty verdicts. I would like to see him sentenced because that is the ultimate accountability. Now, whether that will come before the inauguration, I think it's unlikely. If it does, it will probably involve nothing more than probation, because I don't think anybody is going to have the appetite, unfortunately, to adjudge a prison term for somebody who's about to take the oath of office as president of the United States. I would like to see it stayed, paused, delayed until the minute he leaves office, when he loses the temporary immunity that he enjoys as president, because the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel said, no, we can't actively prosecute a sitting criminal president. Our constitutional construct demands that we permit him to commit all the crimes against the American people he wants to commit with complete immunity while he's in office. That's the stuff of banana republics, but that's where we are these days. But at least if the sentencing were delayed until after he left office, then Judge Merchan could consider imposing the prison term that Donald Trump so richly deserves.
Look, you and I may not agree in terms of, like, I have a whole issue in terms of, a president actually, I have a lot of respect for the office of the presidency, and I don't care who's sitting in it. I mean, the plurality of Americans voted for an individual. I hate the notion that that individual is going to have felony convictions and so on against. I'm not talking about the merit, but I want to bring up something that you just raised, and it's sparking a million things going on in my head right now. There's an enemies list that's out there. And the funny thing is, the enemies list, it's not even a Trump's enemies list. We know who Trump's enemies are. All right. I'm not knowing Trump like I do. I'm not even concerned about Trump's perceived enemies list. It's the sycophants and the acolytes that are around him that he is now giving and putting into positions of power that are going to try to do things for him that they think will make him happy, that will elevate them in that MAGA world. I know that because I watched it as Bill Barr. You all watched it as spectators in my life as Bill Barr weaponized the Department of Justice, not once against me, but twice. First one, when they had conversations with Jeffrey Berman, who was the head of the Southern District of New York Criminal Division. Second, when they unconstitutionally remanded me back to prison because I wouldn't waive my First Amendment constitutional right off of a counterfeit federal document. My big concern is those people that are on those perceived enemy lists. So the question I really want to ask you is, Biden has been questioned about issuing these preemptive or these pardons for these named individuals. What do you think of the legal and the ethical considerations that come into play for such a decision? Because I think the people that are around Biden are the reasons why Kamala Harris actually lost the election. I think they just lack balls.
I don't believe in pardoning the innocent. I think it is a decidedly bad idea to begin issuing pardons to folks who have committed no crimes for a few reasons. First of all, if Biden delivers wholesale pardons to the innocent as a way to try to avoid vindictive prosecutions from being successful in the Trump administration, we have pretty much set up a practice by which at the end of every presidential administration, everyone who has served, perhaps in the executive branch and maybe even beyond, gets a pardon on the last day of the administration.
Wait, Glenn, not to interrupt you, but that presumes that the next incoming president is talking about perceived enemies. We've never had that before. We've never had it where Michael's angry at Glenn Kirschner, and I am making it known that my campaign is based on retribution, retaliation, and so on. We've never had that before.
So you're presuming that we're going to boomerang back to a more law-abiding, constitutional, allegiant government? That would be wonderful if things began to get better after the Trump administration instead of continuing to get worse. And I hope you are absolutely right on that score. I'm not so confident that the people coming up behind Donald Trump won't try to replicate his lawlessness, his abuse, his overreach, and his dictatorial aspirations. But I hope I'm wrong about all of that.
And today's episode is actually brought to you by Ollie. It's clean, fresh nutrition that your dog need in 5 flavors that they're going to absolutely flip over. I mean, you don't have to be a veterinary nutritionist to know that feeding your dog real, whole foods with minimal processing, it's one of the best choices that you can make for their health. A perfectly portioned, whole fresh food diet has been proven to extend your pup's life by 2.5 years. You hear that? 2.5 years. And who doesn't want more time with their best friend? With absolutely no harmful fillers, no preservatives, Ollie, it's made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world. Because the time between Ali's gentle cooking and your dog chowing down is minimal, they don't need preservatives to extend the shelf life. I mean, with 5 protein first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, damn, my dog eats better than I do. And you know what? That's probably true when it comes to Ali. So look, here's how it works. I told my neighbor, go out and you fill in Ali's 30-second quiz, and then they'll create a customized meal plan that's based on your pup's weight, the activity level, and other health information. Ali then crunches the numbers and they recommend the right recipes and daily portions for your precious pup based on hundreds of thousands of real dog results. And get a load of this. For the first timers, Ali will send out your pup's first box with 2 weeks worth of meals and a guide on how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. Ali offers 3 meal plans to choose from so that you can choose from between a full fresh plan, fresh topper plan, or a mixed plan with their freshly baked recipes for your special fur baby. I mean, they also have treats and supplements. I mean, you think that you're talking about a person. You're not. You're talking about your favorite animal. You're talking about your pup. Ali's biggest sale of the year is here. So listen to this one. For a limited time, you get 70% off, 70% off your first box, plus a free bowl and a storage container. So head right now to Ali.com, fill in your dog's details, and use code Cohen to get the lowest price of the year on a personalized meal plan. And this offer ends December 6th, so act now. Head over to Ali, that's OLLIE.com, and enter code Cohen to get 70% off your first box. Again, you can get 70% off your first box, plus the free bowl and storage container. So head to Ali, OLLIE.com, fill in your dog's details, and use code Cohen to get the lowest price of the year on the personalized meal plan for your pup. Go now. Well, what if Americans reject that whole concept, and then there is a massive blue wave that turns around and says, we're just not into this shit.
Yeah, they could have rejected that concept on November 4th, and they opted not to for whatever reason. So, agreed. But here's the other, I think, more fundamental concern. So, we can talk about the Supreme Court case back in 1915, the Burdick case, that said a pardon carries with it an imputation of guilt, and accepting a pardon is at least some confession of guilt. So there's an incongruity in giving innocent people pardons when the Supreme Court said accepting a pardon carries with it an imputation of guilt and a confession of guilt. Here's the other problem. If you try to give innocent folks pardons so that Donald Trump cannot vindictively prosecute them, then Donald Trump may have to go to the next extreme. He's like, oh, I can't punish my perceived enemies by having Kash Patel prosecute the people on the enemies list. Well, then I guess we better go right to ordering my DOJ or military officials to detain them without cause, without charges, and without due process. Then I'll simply pardon everyone who followed my unlawful command. And because both of those things I just described are core constitutional powers, the right to direct your military and your DOJ and the right to issue pardons, I am completely immune from prosecution, being held accountable for punishing my enemies in that way if I can't vindictively prosecute them. So why don't I just take the Supreme Court up on the power of lawlessness they bestowed upon me? I think that's a risk. But I think this is really the most important argument that I have as a career prosecutor against pardoning the innocent. If Donald Trump decides to bring a marquee vindictive prosecution against one of his, one of the people that has, aggrieved him the most, I don't know if that's Jack Smith or Liz Cheney. He seems to be pretty obsessed with Liz Cheney, doesn't he? Let's assume he brings criminal charges or directs Kash Patel to bring criminal. I don't think Kash Patel should be confirmed, mind you. Anybody with an enemies list, a published enemies list that includes not only a whole bunch of Democrats, but 11 Republicans. So even the Senate Republicans might look at Kash Patel and say, wait a minute, you're going to go after nearly a dozen Republicans vindictively, as well as 40 or 50 Democrats that are on your enemies list. I don't know that we're going to buy into that. But anyway, here's what happens. If Donald Trump has Kash Patel vindictively prosecute Liz Cheney, who committed no crimes, that case will go into federal district court in Washington, D.C. And my firm belief is that the trial court judges, particularly the judge who catches the assignment of the vindictive prosecution of Liz Cheney, will cram it down the Trump administration's throat. Why? Because the trial court judges, the federal court judges in Washington, D.C., are loyal to the damn Constitution and the rule of law. And they will not be used by the Trump administration and allow a vindictive prosecution to sail through their court. And I would rather have I don't want to see Liz Cheney vindictively prosecuted or anybody else. Why? Because it could bankrupt them, for one, right? It could do real damage to them in lots of ways beyond the prospect of a criminal conviction. So I don't want to see that. But what I do want is the Trump administration exposed by the federal trial court judges in D.C. as running these bad faith, unlawful, vindictive prosecutions. And that may actually help accelerate the downfall of Donald Trump. So I say there are lots of reasons not to pardon the innocent.
And let me give you the con to that, to that argument. None of this is new. I try to explain that to people on a daily basis, but for whatever the reason, people have a very short memory. Before we get into the point I want to make, what if he doesn't bring it in the federal court in D.C.? What if the action is brought in the federal court in Texas, where he has that court all locked and loaded?
You got a venue. You got a venue problem, though. You got a venue.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about that, because those comments were vocalized and heard by people in the state of Texas. I believe that there is certainly an argument for standing. Why do I say that? He brought a federal action against me in the Southern District of Miami. I haven't been to Miami since my son graduated from the University of Miami. I have no connection to Florida whatsoever. They brought the case against me for $500 million. $500 million. And to add to your point, despite the fact that so many people had asked, how can we help? And I was able, through a GoFundMe, to raise substantial amounts of money. That case cost me $300,000. And it didn't even get to depositions. I moved for depositions instead of putting in my answer. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about the weaponization by Bill Barr against me and how I was unconstitutionally remanded until, thank God for Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein, who heard my lawyer Danya Perry's habeas corpus petition and had me removed, claiming retaliation. There is nothing new that is going to happen down the road, whether it's an Adam Kinzinger, an Adam Schiff, whether it's going to be a Liz Cheney, whether it's going to be a Glenn Kirschner, whoever it is that's on that enemy's list. You need to understand, nothing that he intends to do, they have not already done in the past. Now they just have the playbook in terms of how to perfect what didn't go their way the first time. Now they know, especially having more people like the Kash Patels, having more people like judges that are pro-Trump, that are MAGA and willing to view the law in a different way. I just see it as not about Michael Cohen. which I try to explain to people. I want to make sure that what they did to me never happens to you or anyone else. But that fell on deaf ears, and that's the fear that I have for not just myself, but for many, many people who are on that enemies list, which is why I believe that it is incumbent upon Biden to make sure that these people don't have to go through, whether it's the financial or the incarceration, as I did.
Well, if I don't think the bastardization of pardons is the way to move forward. And I don't know what your comeback would be to the argument that the Supreme Court has given Donald Trump the power of lawlessness, and that will enable him to leapfrog over the criminal justice system, vindictively prosecuting somebody, and it gives him the power to simply confine people and then pardon those who carried out his unlawful orders to confine those people. And our Supreme Court has said that's just fine. He cannot be prosecuted, nor can the people he pardoned be prosecuted. That is an even more extreme version of a vindictive prosecution. That is lawless detention of an American citizen. And that's something the Supreme Court has handed Donald Trump on a silver platter. And prophylactic pardons do nothing to guard against that.
Well, they certainly help. I don't think that they hurt. My biggest concern for Biden, and I don't understand this either, a guy who has accomplished so much in one term, from the CHIPS Act to infrastructure to COVID to the economy to unemployment to creation of wealth in minority communities, and on and on and on. He is polling at the absolute lowest approval rating of any president in at least the last 150 years. He's polling even lower. My fear is, well, you granted your son the pardon, who, by the way, with all due respect to Hunter, was guilty. He's guilty of tax evasion. He's guilty of filing that document for the firearm, which, despite the fact no firearm was used in the commission of a crime, it's still, he filed, the improper document. He gave his son a pardon. What about the rest of us? We're somebody's sons also.
Yeah. Listen, prosecutors are generally allergic to pardons. And the reason I say that, I shouldn't speak for all prosecutors, but we spend our lives investigating crime and asking witnesses to those crimes to do the extraordinarily difficult thing of appearing before a grand jury and testifying about the crimes that they witnessed or the crimes about which they have evidence. They're putting themselves on the line. Sometimes they're putting themselves in harm's way, which is why at the Department of Justice, we have a whole series of witness protection programs available for people who decide to do the hard work of civic responsibility and testifying about the crimes that they know about. And then, we ask grand jurors to sit for months and months at a time to assess the evidence and see whether there's enough to indict. We then ask a court system to assemble to conduct the trial. We ask good people from the community to come sit as trial jurors. There are entire teams of law enforcement and prosecutors who try to hold folk accountable for the crimes they commit in violation of our nation's laws. We try to protect the community in the process. And then with a sign of a pen, all of that is thrown in the trash can. And so I am not a fan of pardons generally. I understand that they are a constitutional power of the president. It's a plenary power. What the Supreme Court has made clear is a president could sell pardons to the highest bidder. And unfortunately, that is his right, because as a core constitutional function, we're not permitted to look at the motive and intent of a president in issuing a pardon. Again, the stuff of banana republics, but when you have a compromised and conflicted Supreme Court, this is where we are these days. So, I don't like the idea of pardons generally, but there's some force to the argument that, well, if your son who committed crimes got a pardon, What about other folks who are now similarly in harm's way? But the dividing.
Wait. But as the prosecutor, you're saying that you ask citizens to do, and it's not just prosecutors, it's also members of Congress when they serve congressional subpoenas on you. So now all of a sudden, as a direct result of being served with a subpoena, because even if somebody was willing to cooperate, you still, as a prosecutor, always serve them with a subpoena to ensure that they don't back out at the last minute. So you hit them with the subpoena, they show up, they're now in harm's way. How do you protect them? Other than putting them into a witness relocation, which, by the way, witness relocation and Donald Trump will never help them, because wherever they are, his people, under your theory, that they could come get them. So what do you do in order to protect the people that you pushed into harm's way, that Congress members pushed into harm's way?
Oh, I can tell you what I did. What I did as, boots on the ground prosecutor for decades is we have about a whole panoply of like 10 assistance programs for witnesses, from the very simple to the U.S. Marshals long-term witness security program, where the marshals have never lost a witness. And I had lots of witnesses in that program when I was prosecuting RICO cases.
Yeah, but you're talking about violent crimes. I'm talking about political. So hypothetically now, you have people like Alyssa Farah Griffin, you have Cassidy Hutchinson, you have Michael Cohen, you have people who are, individuals that were forced to come and to testify, stood up, did the very difficult thing, and provided information on somebody who wanted you not to testify, but you do. How do you protect those people?
In my view, there is no distinction between a witness in a criminal case and a witness in a political case. If there is a demonstrated danger, then those people need to be provided with the resources they need at government expense to get them safe. I'm not saying that happens. I'm saying if we give a shit about witness security, it should happen. Now, will anything like that happen in a Trump administration? Listen, this is why I'm so hacked off that a very bare majority of the American people decided this is the government they want. Donald Trump is what they want. Endangering the lives of witnesses who have the temerity to speak out against Donald Trump is what they want. So how do you protect them? You don't elect somebody like Donald Trump to take over. And yet we have. And this is where we are. So,
I'm not just saying that this is likely to happen. What I'm saying is it has happened. That's the point I'm trying to make. That, we're talking about this as if it's a hypothetical. This happened to me. And government has done absolutely shit within which to do anything for me, whether it's financially, whether it's to protect me physically. They have done nothing. They turn around and they said, thank you for your service. Thank you for appearing 7 times before 7 congressional committees. Thank you for your assistance in the Mueller report. Thank you for being as part of the grand jury for the Manhattan District Attorney case. Thank you for being part of the grand jury and a key witness as well in the New York Attorney General case. And so far, all I have gotten is, well, if somebody comes to shoot you, we'll try to figure out what we can do for you. That's not or should not engender any positive feeling with people like an Alyssa Farah Griffin or a Cassidy Hutchinson or anybody else. Government does shit for its witnesses. They put me into the position. They put these other people in the position. Media made a fucking fortune out of showing it. Government got what they wanted. And then the rest of us, they turn and they say, fuck you, go to hell. We hope to God that nothing happens. But if it does, sorry.
Yeah, Michael, and rather than vote to address that searing injustice that was perpetrated against you and others, a small majority of the American people voted to make matters even worse in the future. That's where we are. And I'm not sure what we do about it. We keep fighting. We hunker down. We try to survive the next 4 years, which will be no small task. But that's what the
It's going to
American
be
people
even a
voted
harder
for.
task. Sure, but it's going to be even a harder task, Glenn, if you're the one who's actually in solitary confinement 24/7, basically given almost no food whatsoever in a room that's 105 degrees with no ventilation, that's missing part of the window. And so when it rains in on you at night, and you end up with flies inside your your cell, by yourself. That this is not right. And that's why somewhere along the line, I believe that Biden has an obligation within which to do something. And I get your point that you don't like it, but I'm saying from somebody who has been beaten up by the system. And I was fortunate. I was beaten up for a short period of time, thanks to the Judge Hellerstein and the habeas petition. But under no circumstance do I want to see what happened to me ever happen to anyone else again. And I am with you 100%. And for whatever the reason is, a plurality of Americans felt that this guy who had done it, now let me rephrase that his administration, which had done it, because I hold Bill Barr mostly accountable for what had happened. As far as I'm concerned, I wanted to make sure that whoever's going to be the next Bill Barr, whether it's Pam Bondi or whether it'll run through Akash Patel, that this never happens to any other American ever again. It's that hard. It's that hard on your mind, on your body, on your soul. It's shredding. And I'm telling you from firsthand experience.
Yeah, and that's why I am so disheartened that Donald Trump was elected, because people have said, you know what? We like the cruelty. We like the injustice. We like to see somebody shit on our enemies. It may not make our lives appreciably better, but we enjoy the suffering of others. And that, unfortunately, I think drives a lot of Trump's support. It's hatred of the other. And when the other is beat up and is victimized, it makes people feel better about themselves. And that's part of Donald Trump's appeal.
Yeah, it's 100% accurate. So let me ask you this, since we're talking about Trump's cabinet nominees, such as Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Linda McMahon, just to name a few, they reflect a mix of controversial and very unconventional picks. My question I want to ask you is, how likely is it that the Senate will actually confirm them, and why?
Yeah, again, I'm no political expert. I was heartened when, at least behind the scenes, they said hell no to Matt Gaetz. I appreciated William Webster just issuing that letter to senators, very bluntly saying, Webster, who of course was not only the only person to serve as the head of the FBI and the head of the CIA, he was also a U.S. attorney. He was also a federal trial court judge. He was a federal appeals court judge, and he, very bluntly told the senators, you are at risk, and your families are at risk if you confirm the likes of Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard.
Each time of year, many of us start thinking about our health goals, things like losing weight, exercising more, or even eating better. But a goal without a plan, well, it's a plan that's destined to fail. Prolon's 5-day program, it gives you tools to put your resolutions into action with a science-based plan that makes it easy to stay focused and to achieve real results. Prolon's fasting mimicking diet, listen to this, it's a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe that they're fasting. It's researched and developed for decades at USC's Longevity Institute, and it's backed by leading U.S. medical centers. Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, enhanced skin appearance, fat loss, and improved energy and focus. So look, it all starts with their 5-day program. Snacks, soups, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. There's no guesswork or planning required, which, by the way, it's a relief after a busy holiday. 3 consecutive cycles of Prolon have been shown to reduce your biological age score by an average of 2.5 years and your waist circumference by a whopping 1.5 inches. As part of my New Year's resolution, I'm anxious to start my Prolon 5-day program after reading about all of the many successes and testimonials, especially that the program helps support both blood sugar levels and cardiovascular health, 2 things really important to me, and especially the fact that it helps support blood sugar levels and your cardiovascular health. So just in time for the new year, Prolon, it's offering Mea Culpa listeners, you, my Mea Culpa listeners, 15% off their 5-day nutrition program for your post-holiday glow up when you go to prolonlife.com/Mea Culpa. That's PROLONLIFE.com/Mea Culpa for 15% off. Again, that's prolonlife.com/Mea Culpa. Go now.
Don't do that to the American people, and don't do it to yourselves. I would like to think that somebody who, like William Webster, who was appointed primarily by Republican presidents, also by Democrats, they would listen to that warning, that dire warning. But it's a crapshoot to know what these senators are going to do on any given day, whether they're going to sprout a vertebrae or two or not, just roll over and hand over all their power to Donald Trump. I think a Tulsi Gabbard and a Kash Patel are 2 of the marquee nominees who are just so obviously unfit, ill-suited to be DNI and FBI director, that maybe the senators will say, we've got to protect our own constituents from characters like this. Donald Trump's intent in naming, this clown car full of nominees is to just burn all of the institutions of government down. And he can, I guess, rule over the ashes. Maybe that's his goal. But I still have some hope that some of the senators will step up and take the safety of their constituents and the American people seriously. But it's a crapshoot.
I mean, but, you're leaving out, and while I agree with you, between Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel, dangerous. Are we forgetting about RFK Jr. and we're talking about our health now? Are we talking about Pete Hegseth, a guy who's never run anything, including, he's a weekend talk show news host. That's what he is. And I'm not going to question his intelligence. The guy certainly went to the finest schools in America. But does that mean that everybody that goes to, whether it's Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Ivy League, does that mean that they're competent within which to run a $900 billion organization, one that, that he has very limited knowledge of? I just don't get it. I'm kind of lost here as to one after the other for most of these nominations make no sense to me at all. And I'm going to tell you something. I actually don't even think that Trump took into consideration when these names were being floated to him. I believe that these names were being floated to him by the Heritage Foundation, something which was very similar to what I witnessed in 2017. There was no transition book in advance of the election. It all happened thereafter. This is a very lengthy process. Anybody that knows anything about a transition team, they know how difficult it is to get like 1,000 names who are competent that want to actually do the job. It takes many months and a very large team. Here, right after Trump's victory, like what happened in 2017, all of a sudden, Jared started coming around with a whole set of papers and saying, put down anybody who you think would be good for this position. And that's exactly what's going on here. But my question I really want to ask you is, when you have individuals like a Tulsi Gabbard, like an RFK Jr., who are and have been outspoken critics of this Biden administration, as well as the Democratic Party as a whole, how do you think that their inclusion in Trump's cabinet will ultimately affect bipartisan relations in Washington, which are at an all-time low anyway?
Not going to help. Listen, Donald Trump, I think, wants as many lapdogs in his cabinet as possible, right? I mean, you sort of want to avoid a 25th Amendment problem in the future. And if you have lots and lots of flunkies and loyalists, they are less likely to buck you in the future. But I really think Donald Trump's goal is to destroy the institutions of government. That's what I think when you put people like Kennedy and Hegseth is a special kind of evil, putting a man like that in charge of the men and women who don the uniform to try to protect our country. I mean, I find it appalling that you're going to take somebody as unqualified, ill-suited as a Pete Hegseth and put him in charge of the U.S. military. And I hope to heck the Senate stands up to that nomination as well. It seems like that one has ebbed and flowed over time. But I think Donald Trump's goal is to undermine the Americans, the confidence of the American people in all of the institutions of government. And the way to do that is by installing agency heads who, are just there to kind of burn it all down and undermine confidence in the institutions of government. And Donald Trump, kind of rises to the top and rules over the mess that he's created. I do think the more chaos he can create, the more he can grift, right? The more the corruption the more the chaos will disguise the corruption that's going on in government that he will use to his benefit. He will grift, he will steal. That's kind of his MO. So, I think that's his goal. I don't think it's a curiosity that he's putting people who have no business as agency heads up to, be in his cabinet. I think it's all just part of his little evil plan.
I think it's more than just naming these individuals to various different position heads within government. Let's take a look, for example, at Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, this whole Doji or Doggy or whatever the hell they pronounce it initiative. It's already creating backlash and raising eyebrows. You have now them turning around with the HB1 visas and so on. Now there's infighting going on between who's more MAGA than the next guy and so on. The question I want to ask you on that is, what kind of influence do you foresee this program, this Doji initiative, Elon Musk and Ramaswamy, having over government, whether it has to do with economic, technological, or just policy making in D.C.?
I think the senators are going to be not especially receptive to guys like Musk and Ramaswamy, who, let's remember.
But do they need confirmation? I don't think so. It's a program. It's not even.
You can't be confirmed when you've been put in charge of an agency that does not exist.
Right.
This is an advisory position, an advisory board. There is no Department of Governmental Efficiency. The Doge does not exist. It's a made up thing to, hopefully, I'm sure Trump is hoping to sort of grift off of this in the future somehow. But the senators, I have to believe, behind closed doors, are saying to themselves, Musk and Ramaswamy, are you kidding me? We are not going to cater to these guys. And I know people, then there will be hell to pay and Trump will get angry. The senators, believe it or not, these senators think well of themselves. They think they're really important people, and some might believe they are. But I don't believe that they're going to cater to these two people who have no power, who have no authority, who head up a play agency. I think it's folly that the Doge has to be headed up by two people, not just One, that doesn't sound like governmental efficiency. But this whole thing is just a bunch of nonsense. It's a distraction. So at the end of the day, I think there will be continued infighting in the Republican Party. I think it will get worse, not better. And I think part of what may prevent Donald Trump from implementing some of, programs that are motivated by his worst instincts, it will be stymied by the infighting among Republican politicians and others who are, appointed to head up non-existent agencies.
Yeah. Well, so look, as the hour comes to an end, I really just have, one last question for you. What do you think ultimately happens if Trump's nominees don't end up, or they're struggling to gain confirmation? You seem to have a lot of confidence in the senators and so on. I have a lot of confidence in the Democratic senators. I believe that now that the Senate will be, it's going to be controlled by Republicans, and it might be a small majority. I have my concerns. And while, yes, I agree that they think a lot of themselves, I do believe that they are concerned about their jobs and about being primaried and having somebody like Elon Musk, who has infinite money to invest against anyone, not to mention platforms like X and so on. What strategies do you think that Trump and his team might use to circumvent these institutional roadblocks?
Well, he'll try to do recess appointments, but remember, it seems like the Senate has already rejected Donald Trump's request that they go out of session immediately so he can cram all of these recess appointments down the throats of the American people. And another important data point, it looks like Trump and company wanted Rick Scott as Senate Majority Leader, and quietly behind closed doors in an anonymous vote, the senators said, hell no, and they installed Thune. These are small data points that I don't have confidence that the Republican senators will stand up and stand strong. But I have always sensed, Michael, and I hope I'm right about this, is that the Republican senators, most of them, I don't think have an appetite for someone who has declared himself to be a day one dictator. I don't think they have an appetite for a president who said he will terminate the Constitution. I don't think they have an appetite for a president who said, I will use the military against my political enemies. I don't think that Donald Trump, I don't even know that he cares about being a dictator. I do think he likes the idea of everybody standing up and saluting him, but it's never enough for a malignant narcissist. People could salute him all day, every day, and it would never be enough. There's never enough to fill up a malignant narcissist. But I think if Trump believed he could make $1 extra as a more traditional president than he could make as an aspiring dictator, he'd be the more traditional president and make more money for himself. I don't know. I mean, I can't look in the man's head, nor do I want to. But I don't believe the Republicans in the Senate necessarily have an appetite to bring an end to American democracy that Donald Trump seems to have. So maybe they say, you know what? Donald Trump is not with us that much longer, right? Of necessity. And we need to have a republic moving forward, not a dictatorship, because then it ultimately all implodes. So maybe they will begin to be more of a moderating influence on Donald Trump. I know it sounds foolish even as I'm saying it, because they haven't really served as a moderating influence to Donald Trump previously. But now Donald Trump, he is on his way out, even as he's on his way in. And maybe the Republican senators will have just a little bit of patriotism left in them to try to help us keep our republic.
Well, as we say, wishful thinking, and from your mouth to God's ears, right? Glenn, thank you so much for joining me, my friend. Good to see you, happy and healthy. And I definitely need to get you back post, because we're gonna have to check on our predictions here.
Yeah, happy New Year to you, Michael. But buckle up, we're in for a tough run.
That's for sure. Thank you, my friend.